Welcome to the Businesstalk podcast, where research meets real-world impact. I'm your host Deepak. Let's get started. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Dobrica Savić, founder of Intellobics and a seasoned expert with over 40 years of experience in information and knowledge management, including distinguished roles with UNESCO, the World Bank, International Civil Aviation Organization, and the International Atomic Energy Agency, as our esteemed guest on today's podcast episode. Dr. Savić has authored or contributed to 16 books, published over 100 professional articles, and presented at more than 70 international conferences. He lectures widely on knowledge and information management, serves on editorial boards of several leading international journals, and is actively involved in multiple global governing bodies. In 2017, he was awarded the GreyNet Award in recognition of his contributions to grey literature management. His professional interests span knowledge management, digital transformation, artificial intelligence, creativity, innovation, and lifelong learning. A passionate speaker, writer, and educator, he is deeply driven by a deep curiosity and commitment to advancing the field of knowledge and information management across sectors and geographies. He holds doctorate from Middlesex University, UK, a MPhil in Library and Information Science from Lumber University, UK, and MA in International Relations from the University of Belgrade, Serbia. A graduate diploma in Public Administration from Concordia University, Canada. His personal motto is, "Strange how much you have got to know before you know how little you know." In this episode, Dr. Dobrica Savić shares valuable insights from his research, information fatigue syndrome, and digital burnout. So without further delay, let's welcome Dr. Dobrica Savić to the podcast. Dr. Savić, it's an honor and privilege to have you join us today.
Thank you very much for this amazing introduction. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm looking forward for this talk because I believe that the topic of today's talk is interesting and fairly important for all of us.
Thank you. Dr. Savić, what exactly is information fatigue syndrome? And how do you differentiate it from broader concepts like information overload or digital burnout?
Thank you for this starting question. I believe it's the right question because we need to define our terms, right? And although there are three terms, there are information fatigue syndrome, there is information overload, and there is digital burnout. Quite often, fortunately or unfortunately, people use them as synonyms. And although they are related, directly related to the same topic, they're slightly different. So each one of them probably needs a little bit of introduction. People are using them interchangeably, which is okay. But if you're talking about really specifics and we are going into, I would say, a professional topic, not really academic, but a professional discussion, then we do need to define them a little better. I would start with information overload. The reason I'm starting with that is because that is the most widely used, and this is the most broad term for this. It's generally speaking, it's the inability to process or to make decisions due to excessive amount of information. And that leads to stress and, of course, unfortunately, to reduce the productivity. The cause for that is simply put too much information and in a kind of in a short time, because there is a difference there. And I will mention that, that when we are talking about information overload, we really think regarding duration, we think about short term, which happens at the moment. Effects are probably similar throughout all three terms because they cause immediate stress. They can cause difficulty focusing. They have what they call decision paralysis. It happens quite often with that. And when I'm talking about this short term, like let's say, for example, we can take feeling overwhelmed when scanning dozens of emails, reports, blogs, and so on, and someone is pushing you to make a decision and to or produce a report on something on, you quite often get of this decision paralysis because of the information overload. On the other hand, information fatigue syndrome is usually it's regarded as a longer term. So it kind of builds on information overload, but while information overload could be very short, this means that this information overload lasts much longer. So it's a condition, in fact, caused by a constant exposure to excessive amount of information. And that unfortunately results into exhaustion, poor concentration, lack of sleep, social problems, and so on. And of course, there is the same thing of decision-making issues there. If I give an example about it, it's like, for example, struggling to concentrate at work after weeks of non-stop consumption and multitasking. And we all do that. You're probably, while you were thinking about this one, you were thinking about something else. You're replying to emails. You were thinking about the technical sides of the whole thing that you're working on. And that is, I would call the basic cause of information fatigue syndrome. The third one is probably the one which is the easiest one to understand. And that was the digital burnout. That's a state of, unfortunately, chronic stress and exhaustion because of prolonged use of digital technology. We are using now digital technology, but if you're using it for too many hours, that causes this digital burnout. What happens there is that we can have emotional exhaustion, we can have literally detachment from the real world, and again, reduce productivity, which is there. When we are talking about digital burnout, it is similar to information fatigue syndrome in the sense of duration. It's a long term. It does not happen like overnight. For example, could be feeling drained, cynical, unmotivated. And we quite often see that in some organizations, especially where the organizational culture is not at the level. And that happens usually after years of constant time spent on using screens, telephones, smartphones, or whatever. Just to kind of recap this, because there is lots of things that I mentioned. If you are talking about the key differences, overload is a temporary cognitive strain from too much info. IFS, it's a mental fatigue from the sustained info exposure, and burnout is emotional and physical exclusion from digital overuse. And I have to add one thing extra, because there is a new term which is coming and becoming quite often used. It's the cognitive outsourcing. And that is, just recently I wrote a blog on my Intellobics.com blog about it. So anyone who's interested, they can. But just briefly, it's everybody knows about it. It's an act of delegating mental tasks to external systems. What do I mean about that? For example, we used to know, let's say, at least 10, 15 telephone numbers by heart. Okay? Nowadays, some people would say, I don't even know my number because I never called myself. All the numbers, so the memory is impacted because you don't need that anymore. The navigation is another thing. Quite often, you go to the place where you go quite often and you just routinely press that GPS, okay, and you follow it while you're driving it. You can also have the same thing, unfortunately, with using AI. You become lazy writing. And this is this cognitive outsourcing, which I also believe it's very much related to all this. And it can cause a decline in critical thinking. It can impact on the longer term our own intelligence. And I believe that it could impact ability to independently acquire knowledge, which is important. I believe that this would be in short.
Very insightful. Doctor, how did historical observations from Seneca's complaint about too many books to the invention of the printing press serves as a precedent to the digital manifestation of information fatigue?
Yeah, I like that question because, when I was doing some research, Seneca, he's the famous Roman philosopher and Stoic, and he was talking about different things, but one of the things he was talking about danger of books, and especially danger of too many books. And the way he was approaching that is saying that because at that time in Rome, it was becoming fancy to get collections of books, private collections and so on. And people would go to those libraries, but he questioned that. He questioned in the sense, why so many books? Because in his opinion, it was much better if you concentrate on few books and you go deep. So he was talking about the deep learning, in fact, from the books. So read few books, preferably related, and concentrate on learning something from them. And that point he didn't really mention directly, but he mentioned that reread the books, which at that time, was in fact the way of saying, okay, fine, we need to read more and learn more by doing that. It's kind of learning by heart, but it's not what he meant. He meant, in fact, learn something deep. The reason I mention him is because we believe that today it's the worst time ever for information overload. That's exactly what Seneca thought 2,000 years ago, that might be a problem. And then we move 15 centuries later, and we get into the Gutenberg era. And what happens there is that the invention of the printing press caused chaos, in fact. There are too many books, suddenly. People were complaining, why do we need all of them? But this was a type of, I like the term democratization of knowledge and books. But, for some, it was a danger because there are too many, it was proliferating. Why do we need so many? Why everyone has to have access to it and so on? We go to our time, in fact, and in England, that was David Lewis, who was an English psychologist, in fact, 1941 to 2001. And in 1996, in fact, he did a research with Reuters where they surveyed 1,300 professionals, managers at different levels. It was UK, US, Hong Kong, and Singapore. And what they did there, in fact, they wanted to see how does information overload impacts their work. All of the replies were, in fact, negative, that it does not help. And so that was the main thing. And he was saying that having too much information can be dangerous as much as having too little. We can talk about this a lot, but generally speaking, there is a history of this information overload, and it goes 2,000 years ago, maybe even before that. But the only one that we have, the oldest one, is probably from there.
Yeah. Doctor, do you think there are any existing studies available on this topic? And if so, how do they compare with your findings, especially given that this is one of the most pressing, widespread, and potentially harmful issues facing humanity today?
That's a complex, very complex question. So it requires a little bit of deeper look at it, because we live in information overload. So there are hundreds of articles, books, and so on written about it. And quite often it's difficult even to say which ones are the most important, which are making the biggest impact, and so on. So I would start from a slightly different point. I would like to mention a few things about the topics those latest researchers tackle, and the research methods used. So when we are talking about nowadays about the main topics being researched, it's the impact of social media. No wonder, right? Its impact on health, on mental, on cognitive, physical, social capabilities, behaviors, and so on. Of course, this impact of digital platforms also causes like chronic fatigue, loss of focus, concentration, socials, and lack of social and emotional skills, and so on. The next topic is people like to go into so-called negative correlations. It's between overload and performance, or satisfaction and motivation, and especially reduced productivity, because quite a few of those are in fact dealing with case studies on a particular organization or industry. Some articles are dealing with how to measure consequences of both personal and organizational outcomes, which goes more into the area of performance management and economics sometimes. And of course, there are techniques for countering, and that's the area that psychologists like to deal with. And of course, that's in their area. Regarding the research methods, I would like to say that there are very few empirical studies talking about IFS, because the majority of them are in fact talking about information overload. The studies or the data or information that you can gain from related studies, in fact, goes through those so-called metadata analysis of literature reviews. And one of the, I would say, the most popular late one is, in fact, you might even know the people. There are Tarumi Gupta, Rahul Bodhi, and Moht Salim, who, in fact, in 2024, did amazing literature review. They call it Intersection of Information Overload, Emotional Exhaustion, and Social Media Fatigue, a comprehensive literature review. That's one of the probably the best, latest ones, that covers that. If you're talking about going back, one of the first ones that I read is Alvin Toffler, 1970. Some people still remember. I have that book with me. It's in paper format, by the way, so it's not electronic. I still keep it because I was very impressed. That was the title was The Future Shock. And I think everybody knew about it. And he was talking about how does rapid technology impact our cognitive overload. So even at that time, which, it was before the computers, the actual computers, the public, the spread of laptops and so on, it's a long time before the personal computer and so on, he was already seeing that. We have also a book by Craig Broad. It was called Techno Stress. It was the human cost of computer revolution. That's the reason I mentioned it after that. Then we have, I think this was one of the first books that mentioned information overload. It was Bertram Gross in 1964. So as you can see, it was there. That his book was The Managing of Organizations. And we have a number of books later on, the works which were covering, for example, The Paradox of Choice, 2004. Barry Schwartz, it was about how does too much information lead to the decision paralysis. I can go on and on, but those are some of the things that some of the books that I really suggest for people who want to see it. There is also a very known book, The Information Age Trilogy, discussing how digital networks contribute to information saturation. So as you can see, people were covering different aspects, but the topic was more or less the same.
Very interesting. Doctor, what role does grey literature play in fueling digital burnout, according to you? And why do you specifically single out grey literature as a key contributor in this context?
Okay, I suspected this because, this article that you mentioned at the very beginning was in fact published after a grey literature conference. So it was in Grey Literature Journal that was published. And previously, I was spending lots of time, in fact, working on the grey literature. And I should probably say, what is grey literature? Because many people don't even know, and I'm not going to go into white literature or black literature, just the grey literature. It refers to information produced outside of the commercial or academic established channels. It's usually the type of publications that are not peer-reviewed and not done for commercial purposes. But there is a catch. The catch is they're still important for business or for research. So this is, in short, what it is. So why do I start with grey literature there? Because There are two parts of, or two reasons for that. The first one is that, and it's, the GreyNet, which is one of the organizations which deals with that, they cover 150 types of gray literature. And if you think about everything that we are being flooded by, it's there. Okay, so that's the reason number one. Reason number two is that the quantity of that information is, in fact, the thing which causes all these problems, because we are not talking normal quantities anymore. It is, if I can just mention a few things, for example, social media, news items, emails, reports, preprints, databases, data, videos, podcasts like this one, and many, many others, that all goes on the gray literature. So as you can see, 150 of them. So no wonder that that's the body. That's the body of this information overload. And I'll give you just a few examples that, for example, with data. Total data created, captured, copied, or consumed in 2024 is 147 zettabytes. What is a zettabyte? A zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. How much is that? That is about 250 billion DVDs produced 1 year. And it's projected that in this year, from 147, it will go to 181. So you can see the progress there. How fast is growing? It goes around 21 to 28%, depends on how you calculate that. So that's exponential growth. Daily creation, that's another amazing thing. It's 330 plus million terabytes per day are being created. And in a way, I'm not saying, of course, all that comes to us, but great part of that, unfortunately, finds inappropriate ways to come to us. One of those ways is email. So if you're talking about how many email users are today in the world, there are 8.2 billion people in the world, and 4.37 billion, in fact, have their personal business emails. So it's more than half. We have 55% of the global population, in other words, using it almost daily. And especially if you're working somewhere, then it's more than daily. You're using it over the night too. That's one of the problems that is being caused by that. In fact, the total number is 347 billion mails sent daily. It's hard even to comprehend the amount of that. Out of that, 129 billions are, in fact, business ones. We, in average, I would say normal person, regular people, we receive around 90 emails a day. 45% of that amount of email are spam. That's according to Kaspersky. Phishing attacks, there are about 3.4 billion malicious emails sent daily. That's according to FBI Internet Crime Report. So those are figures we should kind of believe. If you are talking, I'm not going to go into all these details, but like journals and articles, we have a total peer-reviewed journals today of 46,000 journal titles. That's not gray literature, but I'm just mentioning it here. We also have open access journals, about 18,000 new journals, which is, in my opinion, it's a good trend, but it also, has its bad side, good sides, and so on. That's another topic, but yeah, it's there. What is important is that the new articles published annually, there are 5.2 million new articles published daily. So go ahead and follow it, okay? Books is the similar situation. We have new books published worldwide in 2024, 2.7 million new titles. This is tremendous amount. So when you ask me, for example, like you did previous question, the new authors, new trends, and so on, it is so difficult to even follow because the amount is tremendous. And I can give you, for example, just last thing, I can give you the YouTube statistics because it's really, really impressive. We have over 2.7 billion logged in monthly active users on YouTube. So you can see the power of influence and so on, and the time sometimes wasted there. Over 1.3 billion hours of video is watched daily. Every minute, 500 hours of videos are uploaded. So, I mean, the figures are, so all this contributes in a way, especially if we don't use, and I hope we'll talk about some of the measures we can take to prevent this overload.
Doctor, the average internet user now spends nearly 7 hours a day online, much of it on his mobile devices. How does this behavioral shift, especially through social media, amplify the symptoms of digital burnout and information fatigue syndrome?
Yeah, that's the statistic that you mentioned. In fact, is really, it's 6 hours and 38 minutes in 24, which is, it's hard to believe that, you know, we are spending that much time, in fact, on social media, on YouTube or whatever it is, you know, on this, and all of that helping create this information fatigue syndrome, making it even worse. You're mentioning mobile phones. Out of those 8.2 billion people that are there, 5.78 billion, in fact, use the phone, use the mobile phone. We can say that, you know, out of those, there are 5.56 billion, in fact, individuals using internet. Slightly smaller numbers. So it's an interesting to know, okay, everybody is there on the internet, 5.5 billion, 5.2 billion are on social media. So you can see the impact, you know, that, you know, people, when we're talking about social media, it could be also a good thing like communication between people, professions, and so on, you know, communities of practice and so on, which is all excellent. But, you know, there are many other things which are there. The mobile phones are a very important element in thinking about this. Why? Because 96.3% of people who access internet are doing that through the phones, to the smartphones, to the mobile phones. Why is that important? It could be important also for people who are creating applications. So yes, that's the reason TikTok is #1 social application on the web, far before any other one. It is also important for people who are studying that to realize that it is available at any moment. So it could be used for good things, let's say in agriculture, where you can get information, in economics, where you can get stocks and market trends and so on immediately, or it could be used just, you know, to browse through nonsense information for hours. So I guess it's back to us, but it's not as simple, and I hope we'll talk about that too, you know, that the ways to mitigate this problem is not straightforward. It's not easy. I can talk about the other things, but what I want to mention, in fact, is what is the impact on our behavior? That I believe is important. So we feel like there is lack of time. We don't have time. So many people nowadays are complaining about lack of sleep because they go to bed at, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock, just spending time there. And then I have to get up early in the morning to go into work, and they complain, right? We have weak concentration, which is a result of lack of sleep, I guess. No focus at work. Quite often, you know, you're working on something and then the phone is ringing there and your mind just goes, I have to see that, you know, what's there and so on. And we go to immediate action, which should not be the case. We should plan our time and our activities and so on. There is anxiety, fear of missing something. This what they call a FOMO, you know, fear of missing out. It could be you're missing the phone call, which is an important thing. You're missing a message which comes from a friend, or you can miss some information, I don't know, about a professional thing, or you can miss the whatever it is. But, you know, this fear of, you know, or this tension that develops, you know, that I have to be there, I have to do it immediately, that creates tension and that impacts our behavior. How does that impact our workplace, our colleagues? our social life, our personal life. I'm not saying that, the rate of divorce is a result of that. No, but I'm saying that it contributes to that. When you go today to a restaurant, let's say, or you just go strolling down the street, what you see young people, 4 or 5 of them, a group of them, and you say, wow, that's great, amazing. They're, together, they're chatting and so on. All of them are having their phones, mobile phones, and talking without even paying attention to. So it's like a virtual life. They're virtualizing their own lives instead of enjoying the real ones. That comes also with too much exposure to negative content. We also have so-called let's call them questionable idols, heroes, and wannabes. And especially with younger kids who do have access to mobile phones, they see that as a way that, maybe that's their future. That's what they want to be. It's a very little information that you'll see, how some young kid, won a math competition in the world. Maybe that's this big, but somebody driving Lamborghini, or something, that's a big thing. So it's imposing, in fact, wrong values into the younger generations. And there is also this belief that we are not good enough. We have to do this and we have to do that in order to be, I don't know what. And that has its price, it cost on our behavior and our mental capabilities.
Yeah. Doctor, what symptoms characterize information fatigue syndrome and digital burnout, from impaired sleep to concentration issues, and how do they connect to immune system or mental health disruptions?
When we are talking about we have to put it kind of in groups. Okay, and I believe there are like 4 or 5 different type of groups. That's first of all is the sheer volume that impacts all the things, the way we deal with things and so on. Then there is diversity and fragmentation. There is unfiltered or unstructured nature. And let's say, just mention a few things there. Like, for example, there is no gatekeeping there. And unlike academic journals, you know that it's, for example, if it's an article, it's, I don't know, 15 pages long. The book, 250 pages. But if you go to, let's say, to a blog, LinkedIn, right? Famous one and popular one. What happens there? You might have 200 likes and you might have, I don't know, 50 comments on that. And if you start going to those comments, it's never ending. There is no limit there. It never stops. That's a problem. Instead of spending, I don't know, 10 minutes reading article, you end up, spending too much time of your valuable times. Then there is also something called passive consumption or cognitive drain. What does it mean? It means this unconscious scrolling. I just have to click on that. There is a new one coming, and I cannot wait for the first one to finish. I have to click on the second one. There is this illusion of productivity, reading work emails, which are of informative nature, and that feels like I'm productive. And one of the issues there is, for example, when people love to put, CC. Okay, so instead of sending it to one person, you would like 10 other people, just to have a look at it, right? So instead of having 1 or 2 people, you have 12. And then suddenly you add another one. So it's mushrooms. It's mushrooming so hard that, people don't have really time to read that. And at the end of the day, have a pile of information or emails which you didn't have a chance to read. Emotional and psychological impact. It's another one that's there. Gray literature, especially social media, amplifies alarming or polarizing content. Because that sells, that sells. And it triggers stress responses with people. If you're exposed too much to negative information, right, you might fight that for a short time, but for a longer time, that becomes an issue. And of course, this is what I mentioned previously, like a fear of missing out, which is a very, very kind of dangerous, because it's endless exposure to other curated leaves, blogs, Instagrams, and whatever you have there.
Doctor, your paper closes with practical suggestions from saying no to unfiltered content to building quiet spaces. But in an always on culture, how realistic is it to disconnect, especially for knowledge workers or students who rely heavily on digital sources?
Okay, that's again one of those, I would say, simple questions, complex answers. First of all, there's a question, why don't we realize we have the IFS problem? No, because everything starts from there. First of all, there is something called normalization. That's a constant connectivity is culturally accepted, right? It's making overload feel normal. So this example that I mentioned with the younger generation going out and everybody is on the phone, that also applies for the older generations too. But what is happening is that, that is becoming a norm. No one is bothered by that anymore, unless you're in some of the capital cities around the world where they say no phones, no cell phones on metro, things like that. We have also this corporate or institutional culture that they promote this always available culture. So in other words, my boss sends me an email at 10:30 and say, okay, tomorrow morning we have a meeting, please prepare this and that. It's 7:30 but this is becoming a reality. And of course, this is justified by economic situations, by the urgency of programs or whatever. We also have a lack of metrics. Just like I mentioned, if you read the book, I will spend, 4 hours reading it. But, if I go to YouTube, I don't know, I might spend hours. It might never end, right? I might fall asleep with things still running. We have this very important thing, which is dopamine feedback loop. We all like to be liked. So when somebody puts a like on your post, it's a dopamine. You feel good about it. It's nice, right? And you go for more. You want more replies like that. And that really doesn't lead anywhere. But, you feel like, and, you're kind of losing your own energy on something which is probably not, if you have 150 or you have 75, what's the difference? 50% statistically speaking for you, it's zero. Yeah. We should mention also that the technical companies or the technical design, in fact, exploits this dopamine-driven engagement because they want you to continue scrolling. I have nothing against LinkedIn, but, let's say you finish all of the things that you have there. There is no more notifications in your inbox. As soon as you close it, there is a notification there. As soon as you close it, there is one waiting for you. So please go ahead. And then what you do, I just closed, but maybe this is something important. So this is this dopamine effect, that, is being abused, I would say. You mentioned there, what are the challenges for knowledge workers? I would emphasize 3 of them. The first one is the work dependency. Many jobs require real communication, so you do have to have this open channel of communication nonstop. Performance pressure. Being online sometimes is kind of regarded as, oh, that guy is working, it's like, oh, no, it's nothing to do with that, he's just online or she is just online. Blur boundaries, which I just mentioned, between the remote, the hybrid work, the actual office work, and so on. The lines are being erased, and that's another issue. For students, they're bombarded with the digital assignments. They have to do it. They have to spend time on it. There is so-called algorithmic trap, which study session derailed by YouTube, so on and so on. They call it sometimes Alice's adventure in the wonder world. What does it mean? That, it's a journey into something that initially seems simple, but quickly become complex, confusing, or all-consuming. And that is when we open something and say, oh, fine, okay, but then, it goes on and on, never finishes. The last part of your question was, in fact, is it realistic to disconnect? It is possible, but not all or nothing. In other words, do a little bit, it doesn't mean that you have to get off the grid immediately, but be smart how you use that. Be smart, you can say, okay, fine, I'm going to spend 1 hour or 15 minutes, it doesn't matter, but stick to it. Whatever you're doing there, if it's your for pleasure, if it's your for work and so on, just stick to that. I also believe that small wins matter. And I can share my personal experience because there is one little game which lasts a few minutes, and I like to play that, and I can share that's a solitaire.
Sure.
And it kind of relaxes me. And then I realized that, you play 1, 2, 3, and it goes on. So my decision was I play only 3 games a day. That lasts about, depending on maximum 5 minutes. But this is the way to kind of limit ourselves. Because after a few days, you'll start, well, this is my 3rd game, goodbye. So those so-called small wins, they do matter, and we should try to use them. And of course, there is a cultural shift needed. For example, when we look at the people, individuals, it's hard to change the system. But if we start with a little bigger than just individual, because individual can change the system for themselves, but as a wider aspect, it's difficult. So you can have, for example, teams. So the team can decide, okay, fine, from this hour to that hour is so-called quiet hours. No one contacts anyone. We are all working on something. So in that way, I believe that it is realistic not to really disconnect, but to make the connection more purposeful.
Yeah. Doctor, my last question. Many organizations regard knowledge management as a critical success factor for business performance. In your view, how does information fatigue syndrome affect knowledge management, and what strategies can organizations implement to address this challenge?
One of my favorite subjects is knowledge management, as you know. That is something that I spend lots of time, especially lately, teaching and learning myself, because yes, we learn a lot by teaching others. I believe that IFS hurts productivity by sabotaging KM's purpose. And what is the KM's purpose? The KM's purpose is in turning information into actionable knowledge. It's not into knowledge, it's into actionable knowledge. By treating IFS as a KM design, as a challenge, not as just an individual issue. Organization can build systems that amplify, in fact, the clarity instead of chaos, because right now we have a chaos. So if you're talking about impact on KM, IFS impacts it, for example, it's reduced knowledge retention and retrieval. Employees are overwhelmed by data, by information. They cannot absorb it, they cannot categorize it, they cannot use it, which is important. They, even if they start using it because of the overwhelming load, it is difficult to become what is critical, what is not. There is an erosion of trust in KM systems. Unfortunately, quite often, organizational settings creates a KM system, and people start disbelieving that. They don't believe in that system anymore. They would like to go to Google, for example, or to AI, and they ask questions there, and they come back and say, well, this is not working, that's not good, I have this information, and so on. I'm not saying that we should not do that, but we should have to be critical on both and use the outside experience to improve the internal one. We have also less of diminishing collaboration and innovation. Like example, teams hoard the knowledge locally because enterprise platform feel unusable. And that's quite often the case. When we are talking about knowledge sharing, we are talking about knowledge retention and so on, people leaving the organization. it is very difficult to catch that knowledge, especially if it's tacit knowledge. It's almost impossible to do it, and it should be done. They can, if an expert is leaving organization after 30 years spent there, it's a huge amount of knowledge which disappears. And if that person tells you, well, there is a article, this book, that, that's like telling you, I'm not telling you anything. There is also this decision paralysis and errors, but let's say, because since it's the last question you said, what are the strategies to mitigate IFS in knowledge management? First of all, I think that we should adapt a philosophy or a culture of less but better approach. Because we have this philosophy of we give you less money, less this, less that, but we want more for you. Now, it could be, okay, less, but better. We should introduce KM champions who should take care of this IFS problem and other problems. We should introduce standardized formats and templates so that you don't have to spend half a day looking for a format which you should use. And then once you use it, someone tells you, oh, no, that's not the one. And every one of us had that issue at some point. We should prioritize accessibility. That goes together with the digital transformation, by the way, where we have to concentrate on the users and users' experience. We should foster quality over quantity. And I love to repeat this quite often. It's not how many things you did, how many gadgets you made and so on. Are they good or not? Are they useful for people or not? So in other words, we should encourage those so-called high-value contributions, not just the contribution. I replied to 50 mails. Okay, great. So what? And we should discourage noise, which is happening in the organization. And I'm not talking about loud noises. I'm talking about noise, which is information noise type of thing. We should introduce smart filtering, which is very important. And nowadays, AI tools offer a lot, but we have to be careful how do we use them, because it's still not, in my opinion, I love AI, but it's still not at that level that we can trust it 100%. So there should be that human element at the end. There are systems, for example, in AI for passively capturing knowledge, which are good. For example, when you're at the meeting, you don't have to take notes and so on. There is a way that you can get verbatim notes after that automatically and so on. And I also believe that we should all work on improving knowledge management and IT literacy, including this information overload and all the things which come with that.
Thank you, Dr. Dobrica Savić, for joining us today and sharing your deep insights on information fatigue syndrome and digital burnout. Your vast experience across international organizations and your lifelong commitment to knowledge and information management brought immense depth to our discussion. From understanding the roots of digital overwhelm to exploring how we might navigate the complexity of our information-rich world, your perspectives were not only timely, but also profoundly thought-provoking. Your dedication to lifelong learning, innovation, and advancing the frontiers of digital transformation is truly inspiring. We are honored to have you had on this our podcast channel. Thank you so much once again for joining today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.